We are Rogue Media Sports.
Who doesn't love a classic chocolate chip cookie? Famous Amos has been making them since the 70s, 1975 to be exact. With semi-sweet chocolate chips and a satisfying crunch, it's everything classic in one bite-sized cookie, and fans couldn't get enough. That's right. You'll find our original recipe, the one you know and love, in every bag of Famous Amos original chocolate chip cookies. Find Famous Amos anywhere you buy your favorite snacks.
You haven't heard about the McCrispy yet? Well, then, you probably haven't heard the sweet silence after the first crispy bite either. Go try it for yourself to hear the best nut sound you've ever heard.
All right, it is the Doomsday Podcast. Cowboys fall to 3-4 on the season, 0-4 on the road, and another pitiful effort by this team, but they had a chance late. And Ed Werder alongside, of course, of Frito Nation Productions. We'll have Glenn Stretch-Smith giving out his grades. He's very upset with at least one defensive player. But, Ed, I think we need to start with what happened on that field goal. We'll get to Jason Garrett in his game management. Or mismanagement. Or mismanagement, as the case may be. But, Ed, there was a situation, a call that made it a 52-yard field goal instead of a 47-yard attempt, and that is because of a snap infraction call. That was a false start, and it was, of course, on LP Ladouceur, 14-year veteran. He's saying, I've done it like this forever. So a strange call with the game on the line, and then the Cowboys missed the field goal. Brett Maher, boy, I love saying his name a lot of different ways, misses the field goal. But Ed, getting reports out, and we always try to bring you some breaking news, getting reports out of Washington. Talked to one of my radio buddies, Craig Hoffman, the longtime radio buddies, and Nick Sundberg, the longtime deep snapper for the Redskins, apparently told him that he was hollering at the refs, look what he's doing. He's moving the ball. And, Ed, as I bring you that little bit of news, I think you're getting some breaking news or hearing from one of your sources.
Yeah, I talked to high-ranking Redskins source who told me that Ben Kotwicka, who is the Redskins special teams coach and has been for 5 years, he's a 12-year veteran assistant coach in the NFL, observed during the Redskins game preparation that, in their opinion, LP Ladouceur moved the ball illegally before snapping it, and he brought that to the attention of head coach Jay Gruden, who then alerted referee John Hussey to be aware of this. So generally, in the meetings before a game, a head coach will go over possible things that they would like the officials to be watching out for, that they think the other team does that violates the rules, and they did so in this case. And then, of course, Daron Payne crossed the line of scrimmage, made contact with the Cowboys blockers. Officials threw the flags, and they called the penalty on LP Ladouceur, who said, as you mentioned, he had done nothing different than he's done on every other snap of his long and illustrious Cowboys career. And it did move the Cowboys back 5 yards, and Brett Maher had made a 47-yard field goal earlier in the quarter, so going the same direction into the same wind. He had made a 47-yarder earlier in the game, but now this was a 52-yarder, struck the left upright. Maher was one of 4 NFL kickers who before that attempt had been perfect on field goal attempts of 50 or more yards, attempting a minimum of 3 kicks. So there's some of the background. Interesting that the Redskins actually played a prominent role in this being called against LP Ladouceur for the first time in his career, and it effectively sealing a Redskins victory.
It did. A little advanced scouting. It's not quite like the George Allen days where they were spying, but they did find out some things, put the refs on notice, and good on Payne. Apparently, I'm told also Payne was asked, did you see something? And Payne just said, no, I just went on the cross. He didn't really cop to knowing something, but the Redskins obviously had seen this and spotted that. Very interesting information. We got a lot more to get to. Frito, please play the music, sir. And it is that Doomsday Podcast. And Ed, we've had plenty of experience coming off these losses now. Cowboys fall to 3-4 in most divisions. that might put them in poor stead, but they're actually kind of hanging in there because the Eagles lost today, but still, really, what an opportunity against a bad. I'm sure I know they're 4-2. Ed, did you come away from that game thinking, oh, the Redskins are going to win this division? They're a pretty good, pretty decent team. I'm impressed with their front. Especially their front seven, but that defensive line.
The defensive line. They've made a lot of
their offense,
first round picks invested in that line, and they took away the run game. Ezekiel Elliott had the second worst game of his career as far as total yards from scrimmage. Only the Denver game where they were blown out last year on the road was worse than this one in that regard. I think it's unfortunate that the quarterback and the head coach usually get the blame for the loss, and I think in this situation the head coach is much more deserving than the quarterback. He threw for 273 yards. I thought he didn't have a running game to turn to. His receivers were very inconsistent as always. Deontay Thompson, Ezekiel Elliott, Allen Hurns, all drop balls, well-thrown balls. His offensive line is nowhere near what it was 2 years ago. That has become abundantly clear. They were dominated much of the game, and he threw under duress. It is his fault that he has now fumbled 4 times in the last 2 games. Last week he recovered both. This time he recovered neither, and one of them wound up being a defensive touchdown. So he's got to protect the ball better, but as far as throwing the football, I thought he was much better. He finished within a yard of, again, leading the Cowboys in rushing. So I think it's unfortunate that they lost this game given in general how well the quarterback played.
Yeah, and given the way the defense played and continues to make plays in the red zone, that this game was there for the taking. And the Cowboys, we've seen it this year. We saw it, I think, in Carolina. Comes back, at opening game. You can go through some of these road games. It's like the sense of urgency. They finally move the ball a little bit when they get in desperation. Throughout the game, when they had chances to do things, they really didn't sustain much. Okay, Ed, let's talk about what a lot of folks are going to want to talk about. And our audience, I think we've got a good feel. And, of course, we also like to engage with you guys on our Facebook page, the Doomsday Podcast Facebook page. But Jason Garrett has had some issues in game management his entire career, and late in this one, when improbably the Cowboys have a shot and they're moving the ball downfield. Now, Ed, you step in here, and if I've got any of these details wrong, I wrote some of this down here. Cowboys had first down on Washington's 37 with 1 timeout and 52 seconds left. Okay, from that point on, they got the 6-yard pass
to Beasley.
To Beasley. They got the 3-yard run that they were just kind of, hey, we're going to set up, try to get a couple extra yards to the field goal. So in a sense, they with that timeout and 52 seconds left, they were able to run 2 plays, and then they ended up down there with 12 seconds left. Before that running play where they let the clock down. So again, you have that. We've seen Jason do this before when he has the opportunity to maybe get closer, make it an easier field goal, maybe where a 5-yard penalty doesn't put you in such a tough spot, and it's just totally seems against his nature. And on top of that, it just seemed like you can manage that, whether that's the quarterback, the offensive coordinator, let's throw them all in there, but you can manage that situation better. And the operation of the 2-minute drill or the 1-minute drill, as the case were, it just wasn't great.
I think it was one of the few times in the game where the Cowboys actually had momentum on their side.
Correct.
That final drive. They went up-tempo, no huddle. Really the only time they did that for the most part of the game. But I think if you look at Jason Garrett's career as a head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, the 2 things that I think he's best known for are critical mistakes in terms of game management and big game failure. And this is the second consecutive time that they've gone on the road. And I think the miscalculation by the head coach of how to handle the end of the game cost them a chance to win on the road. He dramatically negatively affected their chances of winning when he decided to punt in overtime against Houston, and then they lost the game almost immediately thereafter. In this game, I don't understand how you have 2 plays in the final 52 seconds on the Redskins side of the field with a timeout to use. Why are there no shots to the end zone? Why are you simply positioning yourself for a field goal. I mean, the two things you have to accomplish there, you're either try to win the game by scoring a touchdown, drawing a defensive foul that allows you further down the field, or you're trying to make it an easy kick. He did neither. He settled for he set up a 47-yard field goal attempt. That's how he was going to try and tie the game. And he still had to win the game after that. This was only going to create overtime.
Now, part of the situation, though, Ed, is I don't think he trusted this offensive line nor this quarterback to hold up, to get the ball down the field like you're talking about, to take actual shots at the end zone. What I think they could have done is, with that one timeout, you still have a chance to get the ball down the field. What did they do? Think about the previous drive when they went down there and scored. Who was scrambling like crazy? Who ended up with as much rushing yardage as Zeke Elliott? It was the quarterback. I mean, there were chances, especially with that timeout, where you can do all sorts of things.
I think it's apparent that in decisive situations, Dak Prescott, and rightfully so, believes most in his own ability. I think he has great doubts about giving the ball to anybody else. It's like Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson doesn't want to give the ball up at the end of games. When it's a critical play, that's when he's likely to keep it. And that's what we're seeing from Dak Prescott. I just don't understand why Jason Garrett seems to have this incredible job security that isn't merited based on his record or his performance with Jerry Jones. And yet he coaches not to lose all the time. Like he makes decisions like, if I lose this game, I'm getting fired. And therefore he is always playing for the tie. He's playing not to fail. What is it? I mean, what did Sean Payton do today? Sean Payton took the Saints, the number one ranked offensive football team, on the road to play the Baltimore Ravens, who are allowing by far the fewest points in the NFL. You know what Sean Payton did on the first series? He went for it 4 times on 4th down. 4 times on 4th down. He's sending a message to the Ravens, and he's sending a message to his team. What did Sean McVay say 2 weeks ago, the same week that Jason Garrett punted against Houston? He went for it with the lead on his own side of the field and made it. That's why the Rams are the best team in football. And he said, what is it? We don't fear success. Yeah. I think Jason Garrett coaches afraid way too often.
I think he fears not being 500.
I think he better worry about that right now. I mean, he's probably boasting to Jerry. You know, remember Wade used to say he had the same, winning percentage as Tom Landry or whatever it was he said. And he said they'd won playoff games because they had the bye. I think Jason's telling Jerry, hey, this is great. We got to the bye week and we got the same record as the defending Super Bowl champions.
This is I think you're right. I think there's some of that going on. And the fact, Ed, that we look at this thing and they continue to not be able to function on the road, I at some point, I mean, how could you ever pick this team on the road? How bad, people say, well, how could they do that against Jacksonville, 40-7? Well, I think we know a couple of things about that, Ed. Jacksonville's horrible. Okay, they had
just
to
bench their quarterback.
Bortles, he's out, and so they did that. They're bad this year. They may go from NFC, the AFC title game to just in the tank, and may lose a ton of games. So that's part of it. But part of it is this team. You heard Tony talking about it. You heard Tony Romo saying, well, they can kind of hear each other talking on the switches on the offensive line at home. They can't do that on the road. I mean, what a sad thing if that's true, that literally they just can't even talk. Really what's going on, Ed, when you look at it, Tyron Smith's not the same player right now. I'm not,
That's got to be the most disturbing thing that we've seen so far on the offense, quite honestly, to me. Like, unless you're convinced that Dak Prescott can't play a quarterback, the most disturbing thing that could happen would be for you to realize that your left tackle, who's only 25 years old and is under contract for 10 years, is not an elite player anymore. I guess you're hoping it does have something to do with the absence of Travis Frederick or the presence of a rookie who's undersized playing next to him. But yeah, I mean, a lot of players cited that the communication was an issue. They had a meeting on it during the week before they took the field on Friday. So a lot of attention and focus was brought to that aspect of the game. And so then if you go out and have the same issues and you can't block and the quarterback's sacked 4 times and under duress even when he's making throws and, forced to flee the pocket constantly to the point where he's nearly your leading rusher for the second week in a row and the third time this season, then, that's I think it's more than a communication issue. I think it's a talent issue.
Yeah, I think there's some of that. Speaking of talent, Ed, there was a report this morning out there. Schefter, I'm trying to think exactly. I think he was the one who had that out there, that the Cowboys were looking at Amari
doing their
Cooper,
due diligence
on Amari
which you would
Cooper.
hope they're doing on every player in the league who might be available for a trade.
Yeah, well,
that's part of Will McClay's shop. I trust Will McClay is doing that.
Yeah, you would think, but they certainly haven't pulled the trigger when given opportunities to others. I know you were not for Josh Gordon, who I might point out had 4 catches for 100 yards today for the Patriots. They were able to hold off the Bears' 38-31 victory, but Cowboys desperately, the one positive you could take from today would be that, and of course, at the second half, they weren't able to go to him for whatever reason. That they don't seem to recognize, when a player's hot. Okay, how do we continue to work the ball to him? Michael Gallup, the rookie wide receiver, with a beautiful route. Tony talked about it. We showed it. We saw that he kind of faked the hitch. And then took off and had an easy touchdown. Great play there. Easy throw for Dak. I say easy throw. It was one of the few times he had a clean pocket back there. But so that's a player that's kind of emerging. But what you said earlier is right. You don't even think it doesn't matter separation, no separation. Anytime you throw the ball in a contested manner to Deontay Thompson or Allen Hurns, how can you think for a second they're going to make a play on the ball? You can't feel good about that. I mean, your best hope is either Hurns deep or Little Bees.
You mean Gallup deep.
Gallup deep or Little Man Hurns or Little Man Bees. God dang, I'd like to re-record this, but I really feel like I'm on a roll if I could actually talk. Beasley had to kind of go up there and snatch one away from somebody. The man's like 5'8", and he's doing that. I mean, that is their best hope right now, those 2 receivers. So
I think you were going to ask me a question about do I think it's practical or the right move for the Cowboys to go make a trade for wide receiver help, and in particular Amari Cooper.
With them 3 and 4.
Former 4th overall pick who's got 19 touchdowns in his 52 NFL games with the Raiders. I think a lot of his decline this year has been a result of poor quarterback play by Derek Carr and a new system. They're 4th in the past 5 years. I would also remind people, and I did on Twitter today, that the 2 worst trades that Jerry Jones has ever made as a general manager involved acquiring veteran wide receivers. 2 ones for Joey Galloway and 4 picks, including a number 1 for Roy Williams. So at the very least, I would urge Jerry to be cautious in deciding whether to do this or not. And I think the bigger thing for me is you only make that move if you're convinced that Cooper is going to make a difference beyond next year, because next year he's making $14 million. So you got to renegotiate his deal, extend him next year. You're bringing him in. You got like 8 games to decide if you want to do that, which really the decision's made for you because you've already given up something to acquire this player. And then does he get in the way of renewing Cole Beasley, who right now, Cole Beasley is their number 1 receiver. He's clearly the guy that Prescott trusts the very most. You saw it last week when he had the 9 catches and the 2 touchdowns, and you saw it this week on that final drive when they had to have it. He went 3 straight times to Cole Beasley. Yet the Cowboys in the offseason were unwilling to meet Beasley's terms to sign an extension. And so now he has incurred, or will soon have incurred, a season's worth of risk, and I would not expect him to negotiate with the Cowboys on favorable terms to them after this season is over. I think for somewhere around $9 or $10 million a year, they could have had Cole Beasley signed. I think they see him as a $6 million a year player. So they're far apart in negotiations. And if they don't sign him, then they've got a bigger wide receiver problem this next offseason than they have right now.
Yeah, I would just lock up Thompson and Hurns. Just ride with those guys. Ed, one thing I want you to do, Stretch is already fired up. Glenn Stretch Smith, former Cowboys coach and scout, will give us his grades. Don't bring up the Galloway thing with him. That's what led to him getting fired by the Cowboys.
It was his fault?
He apparently stood on the table for going after Joey Galloway, so let's stay away from that. Before we get to Stretch, I want to tell you about my bookie. My goodness, they've been so good, and they make it extremely easy. And, I mean, if you want to throw some money down on a game, first of all, Ed, I don't know if you watched some college football yesterday. There were some outcomes. That Clemson, North Carolina State, that was supposed to be one of the games of the day. That whole time I felt sometimes when your gut's telling you, go with Clemson. Put it down on Clemson. You got to ride that feeling, and I wish I had of. My bookie, they'll give you that feeling live, that in-game betting, the most rewarding player perks in the business. And for you fantasy guys, or gals, you can even bet the over-under on how many fantasy points a player will score each game. Over-under, boy, take the under on all Cowboys offensive players. Join now, and MyBookie will match your deposit dollar for dollar. Use the promo code Doomsday. It's DOOMSDAY. It's the name of our podcast. To activate the offer, visit MyBookie online today. That's MyBookie. And don't forget to use the promo code Doomsday when creating your account to claim up to $1,000 in free play. You play, you win, you get paid. Great to have MyBookie with us. Now, here's a solid bet. And joining us now on the Frito Nation Productions hotline, it is Glenn Stretch Smith. He is former Cowboys coach and scout. He gives out his grades. It is our That's a Stretch segment. And, Ed, we got to start with where we started this podcast. And Stretch, you've seen a lot of special team situations over the years. In a huge, meaningful moment at the end of this one, to see a snap infraction, how surprised were you with that call in that moment? And now that you've kind of seen that, how much do you think it was the appropriate call?
Well, I don't know if it was appropriate or not, but I can tell you this. If I was a betting man, I would bet you that Washington, before the game, told those officials, hey, in a critical situation, watch for this deep snap or deep snapper to tend to twist the ball, to act as if he's trying to draw us offsides. That's the only thing that would have drawn them to see that. Then all two of their guys, I believe, jumped off sides as soon as they saw it happen. So to me, it's one of those situations where they almost said, maybe they picked up something or had picked up on something in previous games, in previous situations, and said, hey, you know what, make sure you're taking a look at this, because otherwise that's the only way that really I think an official kind of takes a harder look at that for it to be something that, again, that Ladouceur is saying he does every time he snaps a deep ball.
Well, a Super Bowl winning coach named Tony Dungy has weighed in on this, and he said the false start illegal snap penalty called on the Cowboys long snapper that moved the ball back to 52 yards was horrible. The snapper followed the same routine, did nothing to draw the Redskins offside. We looked at it over and over. I don't see how they could have called that. Tony Dungy.
He brings a little more clout than Glenn Stretch Smith.
Well, that's why I put him in there right after you.
I promise you that. So I'll jump in line behind him, and you know what? I'll march to that beat of that.
I think it's an interesting point, though. It'll be interesting to see if the Redskins confess that they did notice something, that he was moving the ball around a lot, and took advantage of that. What about the kicker? What about Maher missing from that distance?
Well, and that's the thing too. I mean, the first one he draws it right in there. I laughed when I answered the phone saying golf shop. I mean, he drew it right in there like Ben Crenshaw used to draw about a 9-iron in there, and then he, when your momentum kind of gets taken back, you move back 5 yards. I mean, the revolutions of the ball could have been a little different when the holder grabbed it. Were the laces, squared, and then he doinks the upright. So to me, it's one of those things that you have to kind of refocus and get regathered in. I mean, he had plenty of leg to hit that. I didn't think it would be a whole lot different, other than the timing looked a little different. Did that, was that did the penalty have something to do with Ladouceur's pre-snap or how he snapped the ball the second time around? I mean, all those are things that we'll have to get answered in, a Tuesday press conference after they get back from visiting the Smithsonian or wherever it is they're staying around up there to visit.
Black History Museum, I believe it is. Thanks for that. So we're going to give him an F on special teams and move to the next. You want to start with
I like it. Ed's playing the teacher's aide today. I'll go along with it. Give him a damn F.
Since we start out so badly, let's do something different and go with a defensive.
Okay, all right. Let's start with it. By the way, if anybody's wondering why Stretch went straight to Ben Crenshaw, Stretch has ties to Austin Country Club. By the way,
I don't think we want to know all the people that Stretch has ties to.
Yeah, no, he's got a lot of ties. Not mob ties, but he does have Harvey Pinnock and that whole gang out there. We lost Harvey a while back, but Stretch, the defensive line.
Is this a damn history lesson, or are we grading the Cowboys? What we got going on here?
Little Red Book talk. Okay, defensive line for the Cowboys. Obviously, Adrian Peterson has had 99 yards, did some good things, and in fact was able to reverse field like he used to do all those years with the Vikings. What did you make of how this front four played?
Well, they have been getting consistent, pass rush with just bringing 4 and then at times bringing 5. I didn't see that today. Again, they gave up, I thought, too many yards initially to Adrian Peterson. I did think they made some adjustments there towards the fourth quarter, and they started tightening DeMarcus Lawrence down a little bit where he wasn't so wide. And so because of that, I'm going to give him a C-. But quite frankly, I didn't see the fire. I didn't see guys getting off the ball the way that I had seen them getting off the ball in the previous weeks. And for that, I'm giving them a C-.
Isn't it interesting? They don't really sometimes they don't really bow their back till they get down there in that red zone, and that's when the Cowboys have actually one of the better red zone defenses in the NFL, and that was evident today. Stretch, look at those linebackers for me. Sean Lee back in there. How did that? We know Van Der Esch got banged up in the second half. How did that group work with Sean Lee coming back in? Because obviously Van Der Esch and Jalen Smith had been playing pretty well together.
Yeah, they this group they're really good football players. I mean, I think I've continued to sing the praises of Van Der Esch. I thought they made some adjustments to stop the option. They came out and kind of ran a little. Washington ran a little speed option, and once Sean Lee had seen it a time or two, he adjusted. I thought he made great adjustments after they ran that screen where they kind of faked it to the tight end, turned around and threw it to Billings for a touch. So I thought that they made adjustments, and this group continues to grow. And I think it's something that you can really, if you're a Cowboys fan, if you want to see some, a little light in the tunnel right now, I think this linebackers group continues to grow and continues to play well enough to give a winning grade and winning football, and I'm giving that group a B.
Okay, a B for the linebackers. Now, Stretch, I know you got some thoughts on this secondary. Of course, Byron Jones came in there and actually made a couple of plays, and one that I can recall behind the line of scrimmage. What did you think overall about this secondary?
Let's keep in mind the Redskins didn't have any receivers of any note playing in this game.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the thing that really concerned me too, is they were playing heavy outside leverage, and so it was allowing some big throws in the seams, and Alex hit him a few times, and he missed him a few times too. The thing though that really was alarming to me, where there were two different times where, and once it was when Peterson broke it back to the right hand side, and there was another time when they ran that speed option out there, and Awuzie didn't even look like he wanted to get in the mix. I mean, literally did not look like he wanted to come blowing it up in there and throw at somebody, and that runs up a big red flag with me. A corner that won't come and play, that didn't really act like he wanted to get in the mix, almost acted timid, as if he was hurt. He didn't want to come throw himself up in there, or he didn't want to. He didn't want anything that Adrian Peterson was bringing, and that really set me off initially. I didn't think this group played well. Again, they didn't get their hands on any footballs. There were some. Alex Smith made some questionable throws. I'm barely keeping this group above a failing grade at a D minus, just because Awuzie has got to come up in there and get his butt in the mix. That is really alarming to me.
Did that remind you in any way of the infamous end of Wade Phillips's career in Green Bay in that 45-7 blowout when the cornerback Mike Jenkins refused to make a tackle near the goal line? Or is it that egregious?
I just thought, I really did, Ed. It's the first time that I've seen a player in a long time almost turn it down. I mean, I'm talking about borderline turn it down. You see him cut this ball all the way back, and where most safeties and most corners would come flying up in there like they've been shot out of a cannon, I mean, he's passive outside, and there's a receiver to his inside, almost trying to keep I mean, he just didn't do anything. He's just kind of standing there looking at it. And then they run the option at him. And when you see the TV copy, he's in the screen. The next thing you know, the ball's pitched. He's out of the screen. He's still backpedaling to a ball that's been pitched on the perimeter, almost as if Adrian Peterson's going to grab it and raise up and throw a pass. It's nuts. And then when you see him in the screen, it's only because Adrian Peterson is 8 yards down the field, and he's kind of closed that cushion, and Awuzie's still out there kind of hand-fighting with the receiver instead of blowing his ass up in there and getting something done. And sorry I had to swear on the podcast, but I'm too old to sit up here and say Bobo or butt. Get up in there and make a play.
Well, I guess we'll consider them fortunate to get a D or whatever, a D minus.
Yeah, that's
that
tough.
Little example.
My goodness, it stretched very tough on this secondary. I want you to let's think of Jordan.
I can't imagine what grade the receivers are going to get.
Well, and let's give Jordan Lewis. Let's make him part of the receiving corps now that he's taken Tavon Austin's place.
He kept the defense. He kept the defensive backs from getting an F for flipping over and taking a reverse.
All right, let's start. Let's start let's start right there with wide receivers, and I think Ed has a point he wants to bounce off of you on those wide receivers. Ed, you want to start with that, and then we'll get Stretch's grade on the wide receivers.
Two things struck me about the wide receivers and the revelation about the lack of speed that the Cowboys have at that position in this game, and that was what you just mentioned. They had to use a cornerback, Jordan Lewis, on a jet sweep because Tavon Austin is injured. They don't have another receiver who can has a speed to run a reverse on offense. They have to acquire a defensive player to do that. And then there was a play that Hearns made in the fourth quarter. He broke Josh Norman's tackle, and then he ran out of bounds when he was only being pursued by a linebacker, Zach Brown. He didn't even
and it was almost as if he pulled up thinking, "Oh my goodness, I'm going to have to outrun a linebacker." Yeah. It was, and I know exactly what you're talking about. He ran a pretty decent route. It was like a 7 or an 8 pump. He goes to the post and then breaks it out of it, and he's open. He makes a catch up the boundary and has a chance to turn it north and south. I mean, this receiving core is really outside of Gallup, who did run a good double move right there before the half, which the Redskins have been very susceptible to double moves for years. I mean, Norman has been susceptible. I mean, obviously, we go back to what the past teams have done to him, and Dez has been able to double move him on some sluggos. But boy, I mean, this receiving core again, outside of Gallup and I think an inside receiver in Cole Beasley. To me, you can take the rest of them, go over to Arlington, and stripe a good 7-on-7 game. They don't have the speed. I mean, again today, Thompson gets an opportunity to drive back into the curl window, and it almost looked like a replay of when the ball was picked off. I believe it was 2 weeks ago when the ball got picked off against Houston. When he doesn't drive back in the window, almost makes the same mistake. Again, if it wasn't for Michael Gallup and some things he did in the first half, and the first half only because he didn't show up in the second half, I mean, this group gets a failing grade. Because of that, I'm giving that group a C-.
C- for the receivers. That is not the way Coach Sanjay Lal teaches that route, by the way. I think he teaches those guys, Stretch, to come back after that football. Okay, let's go to the tight ends.
And do they have their 2 cinder blocks in their hands, strengthened in their hands?
I think they must be in their pants.
Worried about
right
getting
now.
your butt back into that open window.
Blocks in their pants. That's the only explanation that could be for how slow they are.
these are well coached receivers. Okay,
Keeping cinder blocks in their bobo. I like it. Thanks for cleaning me up, Ed. Appreciate it.
Tight ends. Dalton Schultz, the kid from Stanford, great GPA there at Stanford.
4 tight ends active today.
He was 4 tight ends are active. That is correct. Swaim got hurt, sadly, late in that one. Got blown up, by the way. They tried to run one of those little tosses over there to the short side of the field one time. Poor Swaim ended up, about the 3rd row of the stands. What did you make of these tight ends?
Not a very good job of blocking. They did not block the edge well. Now, I will say this. I mean, there were some opportunities that I thought Dak had to hit them, and he missed them. But this group is not – the concern I have is for a team that wants to run the football and have a physical identity, both up front and with a running back, it doesn't match with the receivers with the tight ends that they have. I mean, they are not physical edge blockers. And when you see them try to get to the edge, there was one time – when they run an outside toss, and I'm telling you, Swaim gets knocked 4 yards into the backfield. Those are the kind of things that when your running back has to then get outside of that, cause the pursuit to come catching up to you. This group is not very physical. They're okay with their route running, and even today, I mean, Schultz dropped the ball that he should have caught in a tight window. But I am barely giving this group keeping them off an F, and only because of the effort that Swaim did play with. But, boy, they are not very physical. Yeah. They are not point-of-the-line blockers, and because of that, I'm barely giving them a D.
I would sign one more of them and just try to get 5 of them active. I'd like to load this team up with tight ends. Okay, offensive line, Stretch, from what I saw out there, Tyron Smith got worked a little bit, sadly. Our buddy Connor had a little trouble at the point of attack, and Collins, and all those holding penalties. Collins had a huge one.
There weren't a lot of clean pockets
late
in this
the game. Yeah, what'd you make of this offensive line? Were we being too hard on it?
No, they Payne and Allen are both big physical guys, but the concern I have is what used to be the strength of this football team. If it weren't for a receiving core, and like Ed was saying earlier, a bunch of guys who couldn't run out of sight in a leap year, I'd say that the offensive line has taken the biggest step backwards. I mean, they are not playing well. Tyron got beat off the edge several times. He had to hold once. What used to be, again, his strength, those big long arms and able to punch and run that guy past the quarterback. For whatever reason, they're playing with a little different technique where they're carrying their hands low. And I don't know I haven't done enough studying, so it's not fair for me to say the technique is a good technique, a bad technique. I can tell you this group gave you a failing effort today and a failing grade. They are not playing well. They did not play well this week. And I get it. You're missing your quarterback and your center, Travis Frederick, but Looney has done a good job in some games. And to go out and really, almost for lack of another term, just lay an egg in this game, I was really disappointed with how the offensive line played. Lack of physicality. Almost as if they were walking through the motions, thinking about going to the Smithsonian tomorrow, which is what I think they're going to do. But I'm giving this group a failing grade for really in a poor effort.
Wow! And Zach Martin came out of the game with a sprained knee, so fortunately they have the bye next week, and hopefully he'll recover before that, because it'll be hard to earn an F without him.
You're turning this thing into like Night at the Museum. It's this field trip they have tomorrow. It is pretty rough when you lose a game like that.
And then you got to stay over.
And apparently it was DeMarcus Lawrence's idea, and the coaching staff embraced it. The African-American History Museum, it's supposed to be a really good one. I want to go there when I'm in town. next time, but still, it's an odd thing for a team to do. It really is, even though they're going into a bye.
I don't think Jimmy Johnson or Bill Parcells
No.
would be staying over and
No.
taking the team on a field trip the day after a game like that.
No, and they say, I don't even know if Garrett will really get them in good position.
I'm not even sure Wade Phillips would do that.
You walked on that dang joke. I was walking into a good Garrett joke. All right, let's.
You think he'll have them like a box breakfast in the morning on the bus, ready to get on over there? And I guarantee you, about half that team is going to have about a 0 give a shitter gauge. So that is not going to be fun.
All right, we already mentioned Zeke Elliott had one of his poorest games in terms of yards from scrimmage, second worst of his career, only to the Denver game last year. Looked like he was a guy who had no place to go ever. There wasn't a single running lane open for him throughout the game, and he really wasn't much of a factor as a receiver either.
Yeah, but he the thing that I go back to is he is physical. I mean, he does bring his hard hat and his lunchbox every day when he plays. He did a nice job in pass protection. It's the one guy that is really hard for me to give any sort of criticism to at all. Dak missed him on the go route down there on the goal line on the fade. So I think this young man is a heck of a football player. It just wasn't his day. And I don't think the grade really reflects anything other than just lack of production and kind of ties in with the offensive line. But it's hard for me to give him any kind of winning grade when you just when you just look at the numbers and you see those kind of things. And for that, I got to give him a C.
C for the running back Zeke Elliott. And then what about Dak Prescott, the quarterback? We saved him for last. What did you see out of him?
Yeah, he didn't have a good game, and I don't know whether he got dinged early. I think we talked about this on last week's show. If you think you're going to run him 10 or 11 times a game, I think you're really making a mistake. He got dinged early. He got pressure early. I think it started affecting his feet, and I'm saying he didn't set his feet to make his throws. There were some throws to be made late in the game in some tight windows. He didn't protect the football very well. On the fourth down, the ball gets knocked out. Then he fumbles the ball down on the goal line, and those are things that he's got to clean up. He's got to make some better throws in critical situations. He's almost like he started letting the rush bother him some. Now, I'm kind of there's a lot lumped in here when you talk about all the things that he could do, that he should do, and these are all things that I think you're really going to have to look and you're going to have to grade hard when you think about paying him the type of money that you're going to need to pay him to keep him. This was maybe one of his, if not one of his, really not a very good performance that he's had maybe all this year, and I'm going to barely give him a D just because he did not make the plays that he needed to make. There were some throws that I thought he should have made to Beasley, especially when they finally went empty in the last 5 minutes of the game. And that's going to lead me kind of the last thing that I'd like to say here is Scott Lanahan really – we've sung his praises on bringing guys back into the box to block that eighth man. Now, why he wouldn't think defensive coordinators in the NFL would adjust to that, I don't know. But maybe he was questioning when they would adjust to it, or Washington adjusted to it. So as soon as they brought either Thompson or any receiver in, they brought Hearns in to block. Then Washington brought one more in the box, and it took him until 5 minutes to go in the game to really say, man, I've got to get in an empty set here, and I've got to get one of these rushers out of here, because they were blitzing the crap out of the Cowboys, and they were really putting their guys, Payne and Allen, on Connor Williams and on Lyle Collins, and saying, hey, we're gonna get you in one. They were bringing a linebacker, so they weren't letting the center come over and help Connor Williams. And I thought it took him forever to adjust. And I'm saying forever because, again, it wasn't until 5 minutes. So for that, I've got to ding the offensive coordinator. And you know what? I'm giving him a failing grade for not getting his players lined up and in any kind of position to be successful.
We're not even going to ask you to grade Jason Garrett and his handling at the end of the game because you're just too harsh on these people.
Hey, I appreciate it. I'm wanting to go over here and get me a couple of Sour Patch Kids before I got to go on this Dale Hansen.
I actually thought the quarterback played a decent game considering the big hit he took early on and demonstrated a certain amount of fearlessness in the pocket. Was pretty accurate throwing the football for the most part. Ran for 34 yards, scored a touchdown.
Right.
Yeah, he did have 2 fumbles. I mean, I can't take that. He had 2 last week too. But I actually thought he played pretty well.
I go back to you got to put him in the right position, Ed. And the right position was when they were in those empty sets at the end of the game. Then Washington was playing 2-man in the same way that you saw Jacksonville play 2-man. And when they're playing 2-man and guys are running with guys, that allows him lanes to step up into. That allows him the ability to get the ball to Cole Beasley inside some where they're not, doubling him up or when they're not, banging him around on line of scrimmage. So, I could probably, I understand what you're saying. I'm just one of those guys that, number one, you got to protect the football, and number two, you can't let the rush bother you. And I thought the rush started bothering him some. He was kind of you could see him at times almost drop his eyes. And I thought there were some guys. I was listening to a few shows when I was driving in here. They were being very critical of him missing open receivers.
You can't listen to those other people.
Well, I understand.
Don't be influenced by the media.
And I'm not listening to them. I'm saying that sometimes you're missing open receivers.
Yeah.
Because what I saw with my eyes were his eyes down and the rush bothering him. And that, to me, that contributes to, to not getting a good grade when the rush starts bothering you. And like you said, he took a big hit. And, he took that hit because he was trying to get the first down. But sometimes you got to be, you've been in the league 3 years. And just like Alex Smith didn't run out of bounds or stay in bounds on that third down play where he knew he couldn't get the first down. You're a veteran quarterback. You got to be smart enough to know, hey, when I can go get the first down, when I need to get on the ground and just, save it for another day. And at that time, he's trying to make a play for his team because, they just weren't moving the football. And you know what? I could be, I could be a little hard on him right now, but I am hard on him because I've seen him do better than that. And he just didn't play with the type of effort that I thought, or with the technique that I thought was good enough to give your team a chance to win.
Stretch, I think we got you warmed up for your TV appearance. You can watch him every Sunday evening on Dell Hansen Sports Special. I think that's the only slot Dell's in now. He comes in for that one night a week. Stretch, really appreciate it. Folks have enjoyed you on the Doomsday Podcast. All our best to you, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks, Stretch.
All right, guys. Appreciate it. Have a great one.
There he goes. Glenn Stretch Smith, Cowboys, former Cowboys coach and scout. You heard him, man. He ramped up the voice, Ed, especially in talking about the play caller. And then Awuzie got him fired up. And, just his lack of taking on Adrian Peterson. And felt like he made a couple of business decisions in that game. And I thought that was interesting. And Ed, we're going to have to kind of zero in on some of that and take a peek. Ed, closing thoughts here. We've had a big time Doomsday Podcast show. I've got a proposal for this team. I want to bounce this off of you. What if you let Scott Linehan call the plays at home and Jason call them on the road? Just for a little bit of a change.
I thought you meant you were sending Scott home to call the plays at his house.
not at his actual place of residence.
Okay, well that was my mistake then.
Yeah, just at the. I mean, this is a guy who, for whatever reason, and Stretch brought up a good point. I mean, those empty sets that we saw, and
the tempo.
The tempo. I mean,
that's when Dak is at his best.
They're just. And for a lot of that game, they're just slogging through it. They didn't do anything in the first half. They finally hit. I mean, this is a offense that if you don't hit one or two big chunk plays, they're not going to do anything. And they get maybe one of those every 2 weeks.
Well, and I guess the thing you would say that we haven't addressed is the defense, other than Awuzie. Alex Smith, 14 for 25, 178 yards, only sacked once. He's a mobile quarterback. He's tough to get on the ground. Adrian Peterson almost had 100 yards. So, yeah, the defense, they played pretty well, but it's hard to give them a lot of credit when the Redskins were theoretically without their top 3 receiving threats in the game. And I think the bigger issue with the defense is, once again, no turnovers. They create no turnovers. The Redskins punter was very effective, pinning the Cowboys inside their 20 almost every time he kicked. And so you have an offense that's not very good, an offense that isn't very productive on the road, and because the defense doesn't create any turnovers, they're having to drive 80 yards to get a touchdown every time, and that's just not going to happen very often with most offensive groups in the NFL, and seldom, if ever, with this group of offensive players. So while you might think the defense played pretty well and well enough to win, the fact is they lost, and nobody played well enough to win, and nobody coached well enough to win.
No, it's an ugly thing, and if you want to find a silver lining, Ed, the fact that this is a bad division, real watered down division, and the reigning Super Bowl champs are sitting there tied with the Cowboys at 3-4, and I don't think the Redskins that we saw today, that team with the lack of offensive firepower, are going to run away and hide. They're 4-2, so.
But you can also argue they're going to get better. They're going to get some personnel back, and yet they've managed to win their way through, this challenging early part of the schedule and build up a game-and-a-half lead on 2 teams that I think are better than them. And then I think the other thing that we have.
I have more faith in them. Can I just finish that to your point?
Go ahead.
I think I have more faith that they could go get Amari Cooper than the Cowboys will make it happen.
Yeah, maybe.
And
so.
I think they're looking into him as well.
Well, and the other thing that resonates with me as we talk about the quality of the division was, Troy Aikman told us last year that he thinks Jay Gruden's one of the best coaches in the game as far as managing a crisis and figuring out a way to win no matter who he's missing. In other words, coaching around injuries. And this was certainly an example of that today. That's exactly what the Redskins did, and the Cowboys had a completely healthy, full roster. And they played so poorly and handled the game so badly at the end that for the second time this season, Jerry Jones, the owner and general manager, who has been saying, this guy, my coach has an Ivy League education, and we've invested 8 years in him making mistakes, and we want to see the benefit of that, and he's a key to getting us to a championship. Doesn't speak to the media for the second time already this season.
That's
Jerry,
not like him at all.
It means there are things that people want to talk about that he has no interest in being honest about.
Yeah, and he
or no ability to be honest about.
Even when he talks, he's not always honest about things, which is his prerogative.
I don't want to lie to you, but I can't tell you the truth. That's what he said to me one time.
I'll say this, Ed, not to put your stuff out there on the street, but we were using your phone to talk to Stretch earlier, and at least one of the coaches involved in this game, I felt like I saw his name pop up on your phone. It's always nice to know that big-time people are reaching out to you, Ed, in the aftermath of these games. And so, again, I'm not asking you to reveal who that was, but I just think he was heavily involved, and it might be one of the Gruden brothers.
Which one? The one who's off today or the one who's celebrating a victory?
I don't know. I just saw Gruden come across, so I don't know which one it was. But
nice.
Anyway, it is the Doomsday Podcast. It is live as we record this from Frito Nation Productions. Always great. We're saying goodbye to our North Dallas studios. We've got some gorgeous new studios up in Allen, Texas. And Ed, I know you love that. Thank you to Hodges Capital for continuing to be such great partners of ours, Ed. And Ed, any parting shots you want to take?
I've already taken them all.
Yeah, I think you have. And
it's pretty much dinged everybody.
Dinged, yeah. By speaking of dinged, wasn't that odd how the concussion thing, and it was kind of like a big joke, like, it was kind of like laughing about it, and then Tony said, Tony was
Romo.
like, Tony Romo was just like, okay, that's concussion, he's out.
Hitting the head.
He's out for the game, that's concussion.
He's done. I think Tony was ready to jump out of the booth and get back in the huddle. I think that's what he was hoping for.
I know you're joking.
So now we've known. I've always said that of all the Jerrys, the least accurate, of the Jerrys is Dr. Jerry, and now we found someone on injuries who's even less correct than Dr. Jerry. It's Dr. Tony.
Although I'm not quite yet to dock him on this diagnosis. I'm not putting it. I think we could find out some point this week that maybe Dak did have something. Okay, so I'm not going to completely close the door.
No, even if he did have a concussion, he was not out of the game, as Tony said. Tony said that's it. He got hit in the helmet.
Okay, if he ends up having a concussion, I think Tony was half right. I'm going to give Dr. Romo.
That's the best he can do at this point, though, is to be half right. on an injury, head injury suffered by the starting quarterback, being half right is not very good.
Okay, all right, but it was interesting the way it was handled for sure. And then he started talking about Tracy Wolfson's hair, and things got really out of control. But he and Nance do have kind of a good chemistry. I think he's sort of given Nance a second win. Like, Nance is kind of funny now. I mean, he's always had a little bit of a sense of humor, but I think the Phil Simms Nance thing was getting stale, and I think this has helped. Nothing against Phil. All right, folks, that's all we have.
I'm sure that's the way Phil will view that comment.
The Doomsday. Well, I don't know if hopefully he listens. It is the Doomsday Podcast. The Cowboys head into a bye week at 3-4 for Ed Werder, for Mark Frito Friedman. Good night, everybody.
Well, Christmas lights are shining, stockings have been hung. You're praying for your daughter, lighting candles for your son. They're living in the city now, you don't see them anymore. This year will not be like the ones before. And the streets are all but empty, the bars have all shut down, and it's hard to find a friend inside this godforsaken town. That emptiness, it feels from your head down to your toes. I'm sorry, baby, that's just the way it goes. Once you were a young girl with lovers by the score, money by the handful, you never wanted more. But they tend to leave you as time has its way, and they leave behind little mouths to feed and raise. And the days go by so slowly when it used to go so fast. Whiskey does not taste as good when you only pour one glass. There's just no way of knowing which way the cold wind blows.
You haven't heard about the McCrispy yet? Well, then, you probably haven't heard the sweet silence after the first crispy bite either. Go try it for yourself to hear the best nut sound you've ever heard.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.